because I spoke at a conference about Bjorn Gustafsson in November, and the two speakers were Øyvind and myself. And Øyvind spoke about Bjorn Gustafsson in Norway, and I spoke about Bjorn Gustafsson in Europe and beyond. And very interesting, because Bjorn is a big man in Norway, and he designed big programs. And so in Norway, they think of him in terms of the Norwegian model, tripartite approaches, and national programs. I also worked with him outside Norway, where we didn't have those programs. We didn't have a tripartite model, but we had Bjorn, who was an action researcher. So what interested me was that, in a sense, there were two different approaches to Bjorn Gustafsson. The Norwegians saw him as a big man who had all the money. And if they said the right things, he would fund their projects. I saw him as a friend who arrived on an aeroplane, stayed in my home, and we worked together all over Europe doing crazy things. And so I saw him as a practical action researcher. But in Norway, he was a big man with a big program, far more money than you could even count. So there are two Bjorns there. So we have two Bjorn Gustafssons. One is the Norwegian who worked with Øyvind, and the other is the internationalist who worked with me. But of course, they're the same man. And I think in our first issue of International Journal of Action Research for 2020, we explained this. The important point was Bjorn learned from differences. He knew that in Norway, they had this Norwegian model, the tripartite model, which we talked about last time. He knew that in other countries like the UK, we did not have that. And so in order to develop action research, in order to develop research programs, you had to work in different ways. And Bjorn was a flexible man. He knew how to work in different circumstances. Many of the Norwegians only worked in Norway, so they did not see the world beyond Norway. Even Øyvind has largely worked in Norway. He has not done many collaborative projects, apart from with some Scandinavian partners. But Bjorn had partners all over the world, and he was prepared to learn from different experiences and contribute to different experiences. He was a very strong Norwegian. He was committed to the Norwegian model, but he was aware that in other countries, for example, in East Asia, they did not have a tripartite model, but they need to learn from certain principles of action research and of development. So he had certain principles. I'll summarize those. Individuals would work with what they call productive partners. You'd find another partner who might be another academic, they might be from a company, and you could work together on a shared activity. You might form what we call a coalition with several different people pursuing a joint objective. And we call those sometimes development coalitions. And that model also applies for NGOs. When we come together to try and bring about social change, we work with other people who share a common objective. So there's a model there that's not just about Norwegian large programs. It also fits into community work in South America. It fits it into the anti-slavery movement in the UK. It's about people coming together because they have shared objectives. One problem they had in Norway is that some Norwegians thought that Bjorn was telling them all to form regional development coalitions. He was saying they could only get their money from him if they worked with enough other companies and organizations in their region. But that wasn't what he was saying. What he was saying was, in order to bring about change, you need to learn to work with other people who have shared objectives. And you can build a development coalition, you can build change in a region, or it can be in a corporation. It's not just about national level policy. So Bjorn was far more radical, far more wide-ranging, far more multi-level than most Norwegians realize. I would say he was a genuine revolutionary in the sense of Frere or Falsborder. He could see ways in which different people could work together. But in Norway, people would just see things in Norwegian terms. And I'm sure that in each of our countries, we see things normally just in our own terms. Bjorn Gustafsson was an internationalist. He had the way of understanding the situation in different countries and trying to enable us to learn from those experiences. So in San Sebastian, for example, in Dusto, they talk, as I do, about learning from differences. They look at ways in which people have worked in other cases and they say, how can we learn? We don't learn by doing exactly the same, but we compare our experience with that of others. And my last point, we learn in action. Bjorn was saying action research is not just about writing things down. It is about trying to bring about change. And when you are trying to bring about change, you want to be able to learn from the experience of others who have gone before and tried to bring about change. It's a dynamic process. And in his article from 2003, which Danilo picked out for us for this week, Bjorn talked about what we can learn from the single case. He wasn't just talking about big national programs. He was saying we can learn from a single case. We can learn from experience from single case. We can bring about movements. We can bring about radical change if we learn and take action and use what others have learned. So I think Bjorn's work was enormously important. And Norway was one place where he was important, and Øyvind is a brilliant person for describing that. But for me, Bjorn was much more than just Norwegian. And he was the one who, for me, built the bridges that we'll be talking about in San Sebastian